My name is King Kok Cheung. Zhang Jingxue in Mandarin and Zhang King Kok in Cantonese. Well, I really don't know what's the origin of story, but I think story is integral to everything we do in life almost. If you think about what kids like most, it's stories. What are the things that they always want one more at bedtime is a story. The purpose is part of literacy. What I keep telling my students is that each person has a unique story, and don't be shy to tell your own story, even in an analytical paper. Who you are governs how you read a certain tale, and your voice is very important. And what's a voice but what distinguishes you? Stories are what connect people. Stories is what turn individuals into a community. So within every story, we hear a distinctive voice, and we also hear things in which we can connect with someone else. I taught a course on comparative heroic traditions in which I taught Greek epics. I did my MA on Homer, so Iliad and Odyssey. And then the Chinese epics, Journey to the West, Three Kingdoms, Outlaws of the Marsh. And what I find very different between the two is that both Journey to the West and the Odyssey is about journeys, long journeys, right? At the same time, the values that are underlined are quite different. With Homer, it's called Odyssey, right? So the name Odysseus, the unifying element in the tale, the single hero is very important. So Odysseus is very known for his cunning, the individual heroes that really stand out. But with the Chinese epics, Journey to the West, you have four pilgrims. Even though Monkey may be the most memorable, Monkey is also very clever. But just because he's clever, there are so many trials during the Journey to the West that he cannot, just by by virtue of his physical prowess and his mental cunning, is insufficient. And yet he's able to overcome every trial. And to think about teamwork that brings about the success of the journey. They have to work together for something to succeed. Literature reflects culture. Some professor pointed out it's because he has so much guanxi. Guanxi is like depends on who you know, right? So Monkey knows everyone. He knows Guan Yin, so any big trouble he goes to Guan Yin. But he also knows all the gods in heaven and in hell, so he can summon anyone to help him. So he has friends all over, in heaven, in hell, in the world. So that's how he managed to get through everything. So this again is very different from the idea of a Western hero, where the individual has to be everything, that you just depend on yourself. And Outlaws of the Marsh is also called Water Margins. Unlike the Odyssey, it's 108 heroes. And you really cannot tell who is the most important. I mean, the 108 heroes each is extremely different. So it's not true. I mean, I don't want to enforce the stereotype about Chinese group mentality, because these are very distinctive heroes, right? And yet the emphasis is not about one leader. Everyone is equally important. And then the third one, Three Kingdoms. You have the very famous oaks, peach garden oaks, whatever you translate it in English, in which three unrelated persons become sworn brothers. They even say, we live together, we die together. It's a very, very strong kind of fraternal bond among the three. So yes, they are very crucial to the Three Kingdoms, but still, the emphasis on three brothers. In my reading of Three Kingdoms, they are not even the most important heroes, quote unquote, in the story. Probably the most memorable ones are the strategists, Zhuge Liang. So again, there was not this emphasis on one hero, but how Zhuge Liang helped these three brothers, how by not listening to him, eventually the fall of the kingdom and so forth. traditionally, I would say that Chinese classics are not so good about looking at the interior. And I think as a result, we have much more black and white characters than figures like Macbeth, figures like Iago, or figures like Othello. You know, I really sympathize with Othello. I mean, a lot of people think that he's really stupid, right? But I can really see, you know, being the only black person in a community really make you so susceptible to, you know, Iago, you know, who is so clever, right? So I think that kind of a gray area, who what's good and bad, is more distinctive in the Western tradition. Except I think today, you know, if you look at films like Infernal Affair, in which the cop and the villain, the good and the bad, are so intermingled and they feel that kind of affinity with one another. I think now today you see more and more in Chinese literature or film in which that area is being explored. But traditionally, I mean, I just mentioned Cao Cao in Three Kingdoms. I think he should be a much more interesting character than the author grants him as to depicting him as just such a villain. Because he's actually a poet. That poem was written by Cao Cao. So I'm sure that like he could easily be a tragic hero or something like that, you know. But I don't think the Chinese was as good as exploring that tragic flaw in a hero or villains that are very sympathetic. In terms of heroines, I would think that it was patriarchy and sexism. So then the heroines in traditional Chinese literature are usually the ones who are able to sacrifice themselves for the husband, for the nation, for the kid. Those are seen as the heroines, right? Whereas very strong women usually are seen as villains. And even Mulan, the reason why her tail is blazing is because of the filial piety. I mean, of course, Maxine Hong Kingston totally turned that around, but you know, in the original tale, it wasn't like we're not meant to remember how great she is a warrior, but the fact that she did it in place of her father. So I think, you know, that's definitely women's strength, whether it's intellectual or military, is not so appreciated on its own. Except for a poet-scholar tradition in which the poet-scholar always want women who is as intelligent as they are. That's a side tradition, but that's definitely not the dominant Chinese tradition. So I said that I would read you my favorite story in Cantonese. The title is Bak Nga Jun Jut Yun, you know, like saying goodbye to his lute or goodbye to the strings. It's very, very short. Bak Nga Xin Gu Kam, Zhong Ji Kei Xin Ting. Bak Nga Gu Kam, Ji Zai Gao San. Zhong Ji Kei Yue, Xian Zai Ngo Hai Yue Tai San. Ji Zai Liu Shui, Zhong Ji Kei Yue, 善哉，洋洋系若江河，伯牙所念，終子期必得之，子期死，伯牙為世再無知音，乃破琴絕弦，終身不復古。That's it. Very short, just such a moving story. So it's about these two friends. One is a superb musician. He plays the lute. And his friend is just a listener. So the friend can always tell what the friend is thinking when he's playing certain music. And then one day, the listener died. And this musician smashed his lute. It's a very tragic ending, but to me, the poignancy has so much to do with the importance of having a listener, of having someone that can appreciate what you're doing. So a very famous expression called 知音 in Chinese is derived from that tale. 知音 literally means know the sound, know the tune, know the music. It's used to describe someone who is a soulmate, someone who can appreciate what one is doing, whether it's in literature, in art, in storytelling. You know, the 知音 is a very valuable thing. And I think part of your question was asking me how this impact on my life. So my life, I make my living as a literary critic, as a professor. So for me, it's the knowing that I know a lot of my colleagues wish that they were writers themselves, right? But I never had that wish, because I think that it's just as important to have people who can listen. My first book is called Articulate Silences. So I really believe in the importance of appreciating someone, listening to someone, and discovering the talent, right? So no matter how talented you are, if there's no one to help you out, to promote your work, to tell people that you are so wonderful, then you are still writing to empty air. So I think this tale really brings out the importance of someone who listens. And I was touched too, because one of my friends whose poetry I analyzed, Russell Leong, wrote me a poem called 知音, and he said, for KK. So I was tickled by that, because it's one of my favorite expressions in Chinese that does not have equivalent in English, because soulmate doesn't quite convey that idea of someone who can appreciate whatever you're doing, your music, your film, your whatever. You can use the 知音 to describe anyone who can appreciate the thing that you care about the most. And I think the West underestimate that, the importance of the audience, the importance of the listener, of an appreciative audience, how encouraging that is for any kinds of art.